Hi and welcome to Doddy MTB Tech. This video is all about some of the rad bikes that I saw at the Malverns Classic 2024. I've literally just spent all day unpacking. It is now, it's nearly 20 to 10 at night, so taking advantage of doing this while Dustin's in bed and Steph's in bed as well. So I'm going to run you through some of the coolest bikes that I saw because there was just so many. I think it was 140 bikes or thereabouts. I think Miles counted them in the show and shine this year, which is probably about 38 more than last year, which just made it insane to go through. In fact, on screen, hopefully you can see just some generic shots of the room. There was so much to go through. This year at the Malverns was a really special one for me because I got to meet a few people that I've never got around to meeting. First one on the cover of Totally Wild here, Jamie Tatlow. It was awesome to meet him. Really, really cool because I've only ever seen him in video stuff before. But actually, meeting Jez Avery, that guy right there, doing a bunny hop competition just like it used to be. I had my photo taken with him. Here it is. And I tried to sit down on the floor next to the hopper meter, which is probably the last time I remember seeing him. I would have been watching bunny hop competition in 91, 92, 93, that sort of era. And obviously sharing a campsite again with Dave Hemming. What a legend, always a legend. And he was actually wearing that same jacket that someone found and sent to him, which is unreal because that was in Christmas annual 1990 and he still had that. And this is like maybe already started digging stuff out. There's a few retro groups going on. I mean, I've got so many signatures on this t-shirt and I think the last time I wore this was 92. We've got Rob Warner on here, Joe Murray, Mint Sauce, like they're literally all on here. Yeah, anyway, right, and my old race plate as well from 93. But I digress. Let's jump into the video and we're going to whistle through some of the coolest bikes because I just want to show off some of the coolest stuff that was there because there was so much that I think it just doesn't get seen in the competition. And I know a few of us were talking about how the competition should be run next time. I'd love to know your thoughts if you were there. We thought that the categories should be really defined and I don't think there should be a winner. Because as far as I'm concerned, you can't pick one bike better over another because it's a subjective thing. Because all of the bikes are beautiful there and they all have their own story. But we'll get to that a bit later. So let's go straight in with the first bike, Cannondale Super V3000. And do you know what? Like I was always obsessed with these. I think I only looked at the cheaper end ones in the classic red, of course, because that was what the Volvo Cannondale team ran. And I always remember people like Clive Forth and various other people riding these bikes. But this one, the Super V3000, with the spin wheels on there, original Magura Hydra stops on there, Pace RC30 Renthal bars. So it's mad, isn't it? The Renthal were doing mountain biking stuff way back then. It's got a Rissy Terminator shock on there as well, which was, as far as I know, not a stock item on that bike. Middleburn cranks, man, so nice. I'm going to keep moving because we've got a lot to get through here. Pace in copper. Now, I never actually got to have a chat with the owner of this bike. If you're watching, please let me know a bit more about it underneath. I just loved it. I've always loved the Pace bikes with the square tubing with the external machine butting on there. And this one in copper just looked beautiful. Lovely bike. And speaking of brown and copper tones, my favourite ever tyres, Ritchie WCS. These ones are the 1.7s. So really skinny. I actually had them in 1.7 because I was light enough to use a tyre that small in that era. But they wore out so fast it made my dad furious, so I wasn't allowed them after that. And then I could never convince him to get me the butterscotch Cherokee Psychos either. So 127 TPI, soft compound, and they just look sick with the tan wall. Although these particular ones, as you can see, are perished, so they're more like plastic than tyres these days, but super cool. Okay, and next to that actually was this Dave Hind with the Mint Sauce graphics on it. This is why. Do you know, I was talking to my wife the other day and said, you know, I don't have any tattoos, I never had the desire, but I think if I was going to get one, I think this is why. It's quite fitting because, you know me, I love mountain biking and everything, and that says everything to me. So maybe I will, who knows. Anyway, this one's got Columbus tubing, a Judy FSX fork. So that was the carbon-legged fork made for Specialized, that of course JMC made famous on some of his bikes, but painted up. It's like hiding under Mint Sauce graphics. I love that, really subtle. Pull components levers. This bike was beautiful, so nice. I wish I got more time to look at it. This one's just got a 93 plate, which made me think, still got mine somewhere. I've got the other plates that you put on your jerseys from the earlier races, but that's the only one I've got the front plate for. But yeah, still nice to have some of this stuff. Shaz Roberts Genesis in white with RC30 fork in white. Man, that is just so beautiful. Of course, the famous bike by Shaz Roberts was the Dog's Bollocks, ridden by Hemming and various other people back in the day. But that, man, so nice. Saracen Killy Comp. So I reckon this was 1993. Hopefully someone will correct me. Now this bike literally took me down memory lane back to 93 because that year I picked up my Killy Pro Elite that had the first year RockShox Quadra on it. And I picked it up from Mick Ives because my dad had ordered me one and it turned up on the bottom bracket. The actual axle was too short. Don't know how that happened. And the chain set was literally on the frame and it's grinding on there. So he rang them up furious. And they were like, no worries, is your son going to Malverns? Mick will bring one there. So I went to collect it. And actually, Rob Warner was looking at the bike and had a little pedal around the paddock and did a wheelie on it. So you imagine what I was like in that era, going to collect a bike from Team Saracen, and Rob Warner rode my bike before I rode it. That was ridiculous. But this one was lovely, and it just took me down memory lane. Also really pleased that this one was ridden, I think, in the retro race, and it still has some mud on the tyres, which is great. Now this Yeti Ark, now I'll say this about a lot of bikes, but this Yeti Ark, oh my God, with the green on it, I think Miles nailed it with this one. He's got loads of incredible bikes, he really has. But this one for me, it just stands out amongst all of the bikes at the show. Now, as the judges, you know, you select a number of bikes, you whittle it down to sort of like 10 that you think should be in, and then you all confer on this. Now, this was actually in mine. And I actually think this is my favourite looking bike of the show. I'm not necessarily thinking it should have been one that won. The one that won, I think, deserved it because it was so rare. But this was my favourite. I loved it. Even the cable stops had been anodised specially for this event. Incredible. And the reason this one didn't get through was Bob Allen had fallen in love with one of Mars's other bikes, which actually got second place. So pretty cool stuff. Anyway, and the other one was incredible. Here it is on screen with all the purple anodising on it. I mean, it is beautiful, but I love that understated cool of the grey and green. Okay, the Brave Warrior. Now look at this thing. This is unreal. So this was welded by Tom Teasdale. So one of the very earliest fabricators, and it hails from Monrovia in California. So I'm only learning a bit about this now, so I didn't really know much about it. So Diacom SS5 brake levers on there, elevated chainstay design, and so few of these made it into the UK. It's such a cool bike, really cool. And this was actually the one that won the show and shine. And I think university, all the judges were like, what is that? And I think Chris Longbone and a few others knew about the bike, but I'm not sure many of them had actually seen one in the flesh. So it was really cool. And this was a barn find. So I think I'm going to try and team up with, I think it was Ollie or Oliver that owned this, and do something because his collection is wild. Next up, Prolex 856. Yeah, I think this might have been another one from the same collection, and also the Kona Hey Hey. Now this was always a favourite when Cindy Devine used to ride them. Titanium Project 2 forks, titanium velocity stem, Paul's components, rear mech, which you saw quite a lot, but the front mech, a bit lesser seen. Oof. Made me hot and bothered, that one. As did this actually, Marin Palisades Trail. A fairly entry-level bike in that Zolatone grey with the neon yellow graphics and fork. They nailed their bikes back then. This was before they lost the Zolatone, they had the coloured rear end. These earlier ones were the coolest. Santa Cruz Chameleon. This pleased me because we don't see many bikes from this era in the competition. And I think, like I was saying at the beginning, I think some categories should be there to allow for that. The original Do-It-All hardtail. You could run it single speed, you could run it cross country, you could run it as a jump bike, you could run it as a cargo bike, you could do anything on it. I think one of the coolest bikes, and of that era, it was great. Nice to see the DMR chain guide on there. I had one of those, made from steel with like 5 million nuts and bolts, and it would always come loose. But it looked cool, and it was a British chain guide. Okay, this Cannondale M400. Now this obviously is not a stock colourway, but the story about this is amazing. So I'm just going to read this out because this belonged to Chris from Retro Bike. He said, frame was given to me as it had sat in a shed for years. The paint was buggered, so I stripped it to bare metal, rattle canned the rainbow, and once it had dried for a few days, slowly poured washing up liquid over the frame and hit it with matte black as it dries quickly. And 10 minutes later, rinsed off the washing up liquid. wicked. He goes, "There's an old surfboard trick from back in the day. Applied the decals and clear coated it about 4 times. Do you know what? That looks astonishing. The finish was so good and the lacquering was really good. You could feel it. He did the flex stem on there, the fork. Oh, I just love it. Awesome looking bike. But it also reminds me of why 27.5 and 29-inch wheel bikes are better in our era, because look how massive that frame is compared to the wheels. Wild. San Andreas by Mountain Cycles. Like, these bikes always do it for me. Here's just a bit of me rambling on about the suspender fork on there. That is a Mountain Cycle suspender fork. So that's the 3rd edition of that fork. And the coolest thing about this is when he designed this fork, so it's a Robert Reisinger fork that also designed the San Andreas frame. And the coolest thing about this whole bike is everything on it was bespoke designed by him. So even the brakes on here and even the quick release system. So this is actually sort of the forerunner, you could say, to what the bolt-through axle design ended up being. So it's an inverted fork, needed to get a secure system that's better than quick release. So he made his own system for that. You can see even says Mountain Cycle patent pending on there. And then the brakes themselves, that's a 230mm floating rotor. It's a hydraulically actuated caliper, and it uses a regular brake lever to actually actuate those hydraulic pistons. Literally a look at the future, but all the way back from the early 90s. I think the San Andreas is one of my favourite bikes of all time. I would love to say I'd own one at some point. Manitou hardtail with a Snoopy paint job. Now, I love this. And I wish I spent more. I mean, it was impossible to spend enough time on each bike because there's so many. At the end of this video, I've got an idea for this show and shine competition. I'd love to know what everyone thinks. Right, let's keep moving. Muddy Fox Explorer. Love the fact the owner of this had one of the original style helmets on there, although I'm not sure I would have ever had the guts to wear one. Riding a bike didn't look like it would do much. And even had like the little boards there on the ground. In the background, you can see a super early Saracen too. Now that caught my eye. That thing was lovely. Comp 3 tyres on there too. That was cool to see. Straight from the 20-inch world. And parked up next to that from old Clunker King was the Kona Huma Huma Nuka Nuka Apua with the Leading Link Future Shock fork. They're rare. I've seen a few of those, but I've never seen one that looked like that condition. It looked like it was brand new out of the box. So, you know, we see a lot of those Larwell Leader forks, which are quite iconic, but Kona made one. And I think it's really cool. It's basically like a modified Project 2 fork. Yeah, really cool. Okay, moving on. This Manitou could be Dave Broadbent's bike. If not, it's one of the retro bike guys. I've shot the bike before, but I just wanted to acknowledge it because it's so clean and so polished. I'm sure he spent about 900 hours polishing it. I mean, I don't know how he does his job if he makes a bike look this good. But awesome, really good to see. And also next to that, this Marin Pine FRS. So essentially using the Doug Bradbury Manitou rear suspension on there, essentially a pair of forks modified for the rear of the bike, which is always one of my sort of like favourite looking style bikes out there. But this is the best version of one I've seen. Now I saw up at their York Cycle Festival. In fact, I'm going to put a link to the Cycle Festival 2025 underneath there. If you like your retro stuff, get yourself there. Apparently there's about 5,000 people there this year, and I couldn't go because I was overseas, but I'm desperate to go next year. So anyway, you'll be able to see that bike and many others there. Next up, Kona Turner Burner. So yeah, this was a Turner frame, the Turner Burner, iconic 6-inch travel bike, but marked up as a Kona. So when Kona were developing their own bikes, they actually were using the Turner frames, as you can see here. Tommy Misser was racing one, and of course in the UK, Scott Beaumont was racing one. And I think he looked all bleary-eyed when he walked past this, and I'm pretty sure he sort of did a moonwalk and came back again, because it's a pretty special bike, and you just don't see these anymore. Now, I'd love to have spent a bit more time with this one as well, but I had to keep moving. 140 bikes there were. So at about the same time that this was being raced, Kona released the Stab. So I can only think, I don't know the full story here, it didn't have the FSR link as we know it, or the Horst link, as it was called before Specialized bought the rights to it. Kona released it with a linkage on the seat stay, which essentially meant it was a single pivot with a linkage driving the shock. To get around the patent, slightly different characteristics, but still a mega active bike and still had that same look. But they released a Stab, which became one of the most popular privateer bikes at the time. Awesome flames on head tube on those early ones as well. Lovely to see that burner, like so nice. Next to it though, Tomac 204 Magnum. man. So there were two models of this. There was the earlier one, which had the Larwell the Larwell parallelogram linkage back end, which was just phenomenal. We saw that on the Schwinn Straight 6, the Straight 8, the Yeti as well, the 4-banger, like various different bikes. But then this later one had, which I think it's about 2002 it went up to. I'm not quite sure the model. It could be about 2000, this one. Had the moto style linkage on the rear end. Now this was Tomac's actual race bike, which is the coolest thing. And anyway, so this was his actual 204 Magnum, complete with a tyre wear mark under the back of the saddle there, super cool. Hayes HFX mag brakes, Thai Expert Manitou forks on there, Eastern Monkey bars and stem on there, race face cranks, and even the original Sun DHS Tomac edition rims on there, super cool. And parked up right by it was this old explosive. Now, I've always had a weakness for the old car. I've got a weakness for all retro bikes. What am I talking about? I'm a nightmare. Right, door's edge. Now, this was like working in bike shops in this era. This was super cool because in the magazines you'd see the really exotic stuff, the Mountain Goat Whiskey Town Racers and just all the super exotic American bikes. And this was a British company. The door's edge with XTR on there, and this one has been renovated and built back to original spec. And I remember this was one of the first sort of like super bikes of that era that I saw in the flesh before going to shows and starting seeing like the weird and wonderful American brands like the Kleins and stuff. But this was an achievable one. It was really nice to see this, and I love that in amongst all these retro bikes, it's not just the funks and the the crazy name bikes. It's little humble brands like Doors. Yeah, classic. Okay, next up, Mini GT Zasa. So this one belonged to, or was owned by GT Retro Tech Shop, one of the trio behind the amazing VintageGT.com. Get involved with those guys. What they don't know about old GT bikes isn't worth knowing. Honestly, it's staggering what those three know. Have a follow on their Instagram page as well, and also GT Retro Tech Shop. I'm going to put links to everyone I mentioned underneath there so you can click through on all of those. Anyway, this Mini GT Zasa had ballistic forks on there, XTR stuff. Like, it was just, look at it. It's just a mini bike. And actually, this was made famous by Mr. Jigs, who's a chimpanzee riding the thing. Was he a chimp? Well, Mr. Jigs, basically a monkey riding a bike. You couldn't do that anymore, could you? I'm sure some people of newer generations would frown upon that. But anyway, it was a legendary video for Hans Rey. Here's a tiny little screen grab, a naughty screen grab from it. I'm going to put the link to that video in the description underneath. It's on Hans Rey's YouTube channel. Subscribe to him if you don't already, because all his videos are up there, and it's great watching. But like, basically taught a monkey to ride a bike, and that was basically the bike. Super cool. Okay, 1989 GT Shazen. Now this one, I had no idea about. I had no idea that before the titanium Shazen that we all know and love so well, there was a prestige one, and it was so rare that it wasn't ever really produced. Now these guys have got two of them, the guys from Vintage GT. Like, what the heck? So I looked it up in the original catalogue, and the original paint job was called spider webbing. But this one might have been a bit later because it's got a bit more colour in it. Now that I'm not quite sure about. I needed to ask them, but hopefully Omar and those guys will be able to comment down there. But it was the first catalogue bike in the world to have the Suntour Browning electronic transmission on it. Now I've never even seen that in the flesh. I did see it in magazines way back, but never saw it, and let alone to see one that's literally box fresh condition. Mind blowing. Electronic transmission in 1989. Like wild, and they used the chain rings that would actually move. Unreal. So here's the story of the Shazen. So it came out like this in 1989, but apparently because there were problems getting that Browning transmission, the bike was scrapped. Then in 1991, the Shazen was made. In fact, they released two models, the Shazen and the Shazen LE. Now the regular Shazen had titanium front end and had a bolt-on steel rear end, which I saw for the first time at last year's Malverns. This is the bike. There's a video linked under there if you want to check out that bike. It belongs to Jamie Lynn from Mania Cycles, who also makes really cool retro stickers in the back of his really cool vehicle. Anyway, that was the first time I saw that. And then, of course, the LE, which was full titanium. And then following that, they went to pure titanium permanently. So this 1989 Prestige one, they're super, super rare. Now, those vintage GT guys have got so much good stuff going on. Their knowledge, and I literally, it staggers me every time they tell me something. Super guys, and big ups to Tom as well for sorting us the speakers for the Mondraker booth. I love the bike industry because everyone helps each other. It's the coolest thing, isn't it? Okay, so just going to finish up the video with the 3 bikes that won the show. So firstly, the Brave, which I've mentioned it before, but here's some nice big shots of it on screen. I'm going to put all these up on my Instagram as well so you can see them, and I'm going to send these to the owners as well. So if I haven't got your details, let me know in the comments underneath and I'll make sure I send those through. The Yeti Ark that belonged to Miles. I mean, look at this thing. I mean, it's beautiful. No offense, Miles, but I really like the other one. But this one is beautiful, and it was a deserved winner because everyone was cheering for it, and I think that's pretty fair. But all your bikes, like the level you go to, I really appreciate that. And finally, in 3rd place, and I think this is a really fitting way to end the video, the Highpath. Now this might look a little strange to many of you, but you could argue that this is one of the most important bikes, not this particular model, but what this stood for. The designer Jeff Apps was making these originally under the Cleland name, and they were known as the Range Riders. And actually one of the earliest ones with super low gearing, higher bottom bracket, all that sort of stuff, actually climbed Snowdon, I think in 1981. The Highpath bikes came a little bit later, and they were manufactured by David Rath-Sharman. Jeff wanted to build bikes that could ride off-road, through streams, up and over obstacles. So having the bigger wheels, and they had these snow tyres made by Nokian, which we know as Nokia now, the phone manufacturer, from I think Finland, someone might correct me on that. He had the 700C tyres on there. Now he famously sent some of these to Gary Fisher, and it sounded like Gary Fisher at the very beginning tried them, was just like, oh my god, like this is the one. So that was 29-inch way back then, but the reason they went for 26-inch was because of the production line. They couldn't get enough of them, they couldn't get the wheels made strong enough, all the other stuff. So actually mountain bikes would have been 29-inch from the beginning. But that's a whole other story to delve into. Now, Jeff Apps unfortunately passed away recently, so I think it's quite fitting just to leave you some shots on screen. So yeah, it might look simple, but actually what Jeff Apps did back then was a look at the future. Hopefully you've enjoyed looking through the way my mad little mind works, looking at all this stuff. Absolutely loved chatting to everyone at the Malverns. Please do get involved down there, give us some love in the comments, share the video around the stuff. And I just want to run my idea past you for the show and shine next year and just see what people think. Like, I'm not trying to lobby anything, I just had the idea that because there's so many bikes there we don't know anything about, half of them, all the bikes entering should have a number plate on them or some kind of board with some bullet point information about it. And it could be like, my name's Bob and I could never afford this bike when I was a kid, and now I spent the last 10 years finding one and building one. Woohoo, there you go. That would be great information about that bike. Better than that, I feel like the judging panel should be decided in advance, and we have a long table, and as the people bring their bikes into the show and shine, you walk past the judging panel. Hi, my name's Chris, this is my Yeti, and so forth. Instantly, the judges will get the opportunity to see all of the bikes before we browse through them, and you get to meet the judges as well. I just think would work really well, and of course the categories. So let us know what you think in the comments underneath. I'll see you in another video soon. Take care. Ta-ra.